Good to be up here. Thank you, Hannah. Oh, it's so good to have so many young people doing crafts in the back. But I get the pleasure of talking to you guys. I'm really excited for that. This morning, I want us to think about seeking after God. How do we seek after a cosmic God creator but made man? I wonder if anyone's played hide and seek recently. Evangeline's just getting into hide and seek. Yeah. I've noticed that when kids start playing hide and seek, they often want to be found. Evangeline kind of gets bored of hiding and then will come running at me. And when I play with my cousins, they do the same. I was a professional hide and seeker as a child. I could hide for hours and I wouldn't come out until food was ready. And then I'd go, yes, I've won. And everyone else had gone home by that stage. I'd be behind the curtain. And, it was good fun. Similar to kids who don't quite understand and don't want to hide for hours like I did. They want to be found. But our Creator God also wants to be found. It's a good job that we're told to seek after a God who doesn't stay hidden, but wants to have a relationship with us. And through the passage that we're reading today, I think that will become clear. We'll be reading from Luke 8. We'll be reading about the woman with bleeding for 12 years. So if you've got a Bible, do turn there. So Luke chapter 8. And just for some context, this is in the high point of Jesus' ministry. This is where he was very public, and there were crowds swarming to him, and his calendar was becoming very, very packed. And Jesus is actually in the middle of going to perform a miracle, going to Jairus' house. So starting at verse 42. And as Jesus went, as he was going to Jairus' house, the people pressed around him, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all of her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him, Jesus, and touched the fringe of his garment. Immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who is that who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Somebody touched me, for I perceived that power had gone out from me." And when the woman saw that she could not be hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." I love this bit of scripture. I think this is actually Tori's favorite part of the Gospels. We can learn a lot about this woman. But first of all, let's remind ourselves who God is. Who is this God that we worship? I want to point our attention to that God is a God who is present. For this woman, Jesus was in physical form, walking the streets, surrounded by the crowd. In the Bible, we hear that God was present among his people. For the Israelites, it would have been a hurricane going before them, or maybe when there was a miracle that took place. In the temple, God's presence came down. We see in Psalms 139 a powerful passage. Let me read it to you. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uppermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness will cover me, and the light about me be night. Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as day, but darkness is as light with you. God is present with his creation. There is nowhere we can go to escape his presence. So we remind ourselves that God is a present God. He's also a knowable God. How do we know God? Well, it's because he is a being. He's not an ethereal cloud off in the distance that doesn't relate to his creation. He's a being, he's a creator, and he enjoys interacting with his creation. We can know him through the Bible. We can know him through going on a walk and observing his creation. We can know him through testimonies. He's actually a God who invites people to know him. Now, we might spend a whole lifetime trying to get to know God, and by the end, you might be a step further, a step closer to knowing him. But it is a lifelong pursuit of gaining knowledge of God. And thirdly, God is a powerful being. He created us, and all things are sustained through him. So he's present, he's knowable, and he's powerful. So as we reread this verse of the woman coming to Jesus, I want us to know those things, that he is present, knowable, and powerful. That was true for this woman, and it is true for us today. So let's go back to Luke. Let's remind ourselves of this woman's condition. So she was most likely a widow. She was most likely spending most of her time on her own, isolated. Under the law, she was unclean. And all those who would have touched her or touched things that she touched would also be unclean. So actually, she was living in a social and religious isolation. People would have been scared to come near her because that would have meant they'd had to cross off everything in their calendar. It reminds me a little bit of COVID. You might have had loads of plans, and then suddenly they were all put to bed and you had to stay inside. But actually, this is something that this woman lived for 12 years. Not only that, it would have been painful. It would have been draining of energy. It doesn't take long after talking to someone with chronic illness to see how much it affects your life. And this is something this lady has been living with for many years. As she went through the crowd, she's also in danger. This is somebody who's supposed to be on the outskirts of the town and not interacting with the crowd. I imagine as she was going through, how people, if they were aware of what their reactions would be. Go back, you're not supposed to be here. This is where the crowd is seeking after Jesus. You're unclean. Don't make Jesus unclean. Don't make us unclean. But we see from her that she was desperate. We know that she was desperate because she was willing to break through these social conventions, these religious laws that were important to the Jewish people. She desired to be healed. She desired to encounter Jesus. When we meet here on a Sunday morning, we're desiring to meet with people. We're desiring to meet with God. We know that we serve a God who is present, like I said, and we desire to meet his presence. We desire to interact with him and say, Jesus, change me. So she was desperate and desired Jesus. She also had faith. She had faith that this man, there was rumors going around that he was healing people, and when she found him, he was going from one location to the other healing. She had faith that if I could just touch his garment, I could be healed. Now, we don't see this kind of healing in the Gospels again. It's the only time we see that Jesus healed someone through his garments. But I think the thing that I'd love to draw our attention to is that she had an expectation that being around Jesus was going to be a good thing. It could only be a good thing. And this resulted in action. This resulted in her physically changing where she was. She knew Jesus was in town and the crowds were surrounding him. She had to fight to push herself to the front. We read later on that Peter's saying, well, how are we going to identify who touched you? So we can imagine this is a very crowded atmosphere. So she was desperate, she had faith, and she took action. I want to reread that last few verses. So let's go back to Luke chapter 8. 46. But Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceived that power has gone out from me. And when the woman saw that she could not be hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And this is Jesus' response. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." I'd love to draw attention to this. Jesus, first of all, heals her. The thing that she desired most, the thing that led her to take action. She is healed instantly. Second, that word daughter. And now we don't have this woman's name. Often in the Gospels, we don't have women's names. There are a few cases. But here, Jesus uses the word daughter, and I think this is so precious. This is someone who was an outcast, someone who, though Jewish, wasn't allowed to interact with Jewish society. She was removed from all things that were considered holy, and if she touched anyone, they would also have to be isolated. So he says, "You are mine, you are my daughter." He gives healing, and then the last part, "Go in peace." He gives peace. I don't know if she was asking for peace, but Jesus gave it anyway. "You are my daughter, you are healed, and go in peace." Often when we interact with God, he gives those things. He calls each of us his own, and he gives peace. Our situation might not instantly change, but have you felt that peace that he gives? And then healing. She was instantly healed. And I've witnessed people be healed from illnesses. I've also witnessed people lead a whole life without healing. And this is one of the mysteries that I still need to understand more. But we see that through her faith, she is healed. So I want to look at us. We've seen God, we've reminded ourselves who God is, that he's present, knowable, and powerful. We've seen this woman, that she is desperate, has faith, and took action. Now let's turn to ourselves. I want to see if we have 3 options that we can identify. So we can either try and hide from God's presence. We could be neutral, or what I'm calling retired. Like, I've done that, I'm okay just stepping out now. I don't want to push into the crowd. Or we can be a seeker like this lady. So let's first think about hide. What would it look like to hide from God? Well, right at the start of the Bible, we see that Adam and Eve, after they had eaten the fruit, tried to hide from God. And God asked that rhetoric question of, "Where are you?" They tried their best to hide because of their shame. And it's often shame that makes us as Christians most want to hide, I think. But what about if you aren't a believer? I know many people who don't want to seek God and are trying to hide. My father himself has walked away from God in the past few years because of sin in his life. And he'd rather hide from God than have to deal with the things that he's messed up with. And that is a journey I'm praying him through. And I hope that one day he'll realize, actually, you can't hide from God. We've already identified that his presence is everywhere, but also that he gives peace and he gives healing and he calls us his own. What about Jonah and the whale? Jonah didn't like the assignment that God gave him, so he was like, "I'm going the opposite way." We see that God then draws him back into his plan, though he's still kicking and screaming at the end of the story. We can try and hide from God's presence like Adam and Eve, or like Jonah. But as the psalm said, where can we go to escape God's presence? The second option, so we can hide, or what about being neutral? "Oh, that's not for me. I don't want to have to press through the crowd. I don't want to take action." Or retired. "I used to do that, but now actually I'm happy sitting back. I'm happy telling other people how to seek God's presence, but I myself, I'm happy just staying." I want to draw our attention to Eli in the book of Samuel. So if you wouldn't mind turning over to Samuel 3.
Which Samuel?
1 Samuel 3. So Eli's job as high priest is to curate an area where people can hear from God. His job was to be in the temple, giving offerings to the temple on behalf of the people of Israel, but also as a mouthpiece for God. So 1 Samuel chapter 3. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent visions. Let's pause there. This was a time when Israel had pushed against the will of God, and God's presence seemed to be further away. There was a lack of miracles. There was forces around the nation that seemed to be on the attack. And the people who were supposed to be the priests were not doing their job right, were cheating the people, taking from the offering. And therefore, God's presence seemed removed. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of the Lord was. Verse 4, Then the Lord said to Samuel, and he said, Here I am. And Samuel ran to Eli and said, Let me start again. And then the Lord called Samuel, and he said, Here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, Here I am. You have called me. But he said, I have not called you. Lay down again. So he went and lay down. And the Lord called again, Samuel. And Samuel rose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you have called me. But Eli said, I did not call you, my son. Lie down again. Then Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. Verse 8, And the Lord called Samuel again the third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you have called me. Then Eli perceived that the Lord had called the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, Go, lay down, and if he calls you, you should say, Speak, Lord, for I am your servant. So that Samuel went and lay down in his place. Do carry on reading this at home. We see that the Lord again calls Samuel. I've often seen Eli as a wise master in this situation. He's showing his apprentice, this young Samuel, that the Lord has called you. Go back and listen to him. But then I'm reminded that actually that's not quite God's view of Eli and his family. They were about to be shown that their lineage would be stopped. That it wouldn't be their family who would be able to maintain the temple. And we remember that the word of the Lord was rare in those days. So, if you are Eli and your job is to hear from God, I wonder where you would be if you were told that God is speaking in the next room. It's your job to hear from him, and you're saying, Oh, that's God. You go and say, Yes, I'm your servant. I wonder if you were in that situation, if you'd be a little bit more curious. Would you get up and say, it may be late at night, but I'm going to go. If that's where God's presence is manifesting, then that's where I want to be. I can tell you this, if God was working in miraculous ways somewhere close to me, and I was hearing from his people, whoa, God's doing this amazing thing, I would be down there. I'm not saying that I would leave this church and go somewhere else where the action is, but what I would want to do is see what is going on here. What is God doing here? I want to bring that back to where I live. We hear of this revival happening in the UK with people turning to him. If that doesn't excite us and motivate us to research this and say, well, why is God working in that way there? What could we do here? Lord, would you bring that to where we live? I don't want to change our view of Eli in a dramatic way, but I do want you to reassess it. His job was to minister before the presence of the Lord, and the presence of the Lord had been rare and then suddenly appeared, and he didn't move. I wonder if that's how we feel. Sometimes I'm great at telling young people in youth group how to live their Christian life, but do I always tell myself the same thing? It's much easier for me to tell a young person that they need to be spending an hour every morning praying, and then the next morning I spend 5 minutes and then get distracted. It's our job as Christians to commend each other and encourage each other. But I wonder how often we say the right things to others but struggle to live it ourselves. I think I need to own up to that. So we can hide from God. We can attempt to hide from God like Jonah or Adam and Eve. We can be neutral or retired. like Eli. Let's turn one last time to Luke. So Luke chapter 8. This woman was a seeker. She heard that Jesus was in town, and she took action to go and encounter him. Her faith and her action showed that she was desperate. She wanted to encounter Jesus, and she took action. We might know a lot about God, but he wants to be sought out. Let's remind ourselves of who God is. He wants to be known. It's not a once and done. As Christians, we've got to continually seek out God's presence. In a moment, we'll turn to how we seek out his presence. But I love that even though healing might not come instantly for us, he does call us his own immediately. So how do we seek out God's presence for us? Again, I've got 3 different suggestions. So we know that God is present in his creation. So let's seek his presence. Well, how do we seek God's presence when we don't have Jesus walking down the street like this lady had? Well, here's some suggestions. We can seek his presence in worship. We can seek his presence in our quiet time. I often go on a prayer walk, and that's when I feel most connected to God. There is corporate times of fellowship where we can seek God's presence and prayer. And what about the spiritual disciplines, like fasting? These are opportunities where we can call out to God and say, Lord, I want to know more about you. I want to feel your presence here. So there's some suggestions of seeking God's presence. How about him being a knowable God? Well, let's seek to know him. And the first thing is he has given us his word. There is enough Bibles in this country for everyone to have 7 and to give one to their neighbor. Well, if we want to know God, then we look to his word. How about testimony? When I talk to another Christian and they share a testimony of what they've experienced of God, that helps me realize, like, oh yeah, God did that for you. That is amazing. That's the God that I follow too. His people, when we gather in church, we see and hear more about him through his people. And again, it's his presence. When people encounter God's presence, they know him. So seek his presence, seek to know him, and then lastly, seek his power. God is a powerful God. And we can see that when we observe his creation. But also when we hear those testimonies, when we hear faith stories, when we hear what God has done for his people. When we hear about healing, when we hear about changing tides, where actually he is building his church despite persecution, we see his power. When we read the Gospels, we hear of God's power. And what about spiritual gifts? When we see people working through spiritual gifts and God using them to do great things, we are reminded that God is an almighty being. He uses his people. So God is present, knowable, and powerful. And just like this woman with bleeding, let's seek his presence, let's seek to know him, and let's seek after his power. And he will call you his own, and he will give peace. I wonder if this week you can take one of those action points. This week, can you seek his presence more, seek to know him more, or seek his power? This week, choose one of those things. Let's be a people who are eagerly seeking after God. Right at the start, I said, Evangeline loves to be sought after, and she'll come running to me when I'm hunting her down in the house, saying, where are you? Well, God is the same. He loves to be found. Let's seek after him as a people. I've got a psalm that I want to conclude on, and then the worship team, it would be great to have you back up. This is Psalm 84. Oh, these are beautiful words. Psalm 84. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, yes, faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and flesh sing for joy to the living Lord. Even the sparrow finds a home, and the swallow a nest for herself. There she may lay her young. At your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house, ever singing your praise. Let's jump to verse 10. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold for those who walk uprightly. O Lord of hosts, blessed is the one who trusts you. Let's seek God's presence.